Life is full of complexities, and sometimes the most intriguing truths are the ones that seem to contradict themselves. Paradoxes, those mind-bending contradictions that defy logic, challenge our understanding of reality and force us to look deeper into the fabric of our lives. From the seemingly simple decisions we make every day to the profound mysteries of time and human behavior, paradoxes reveal the tension between what we think we know and the reality that unfolds before us. In this exploration of 10 fascinating paradoxes, we'll dive into the perplexing contradictions that govern our choices, the pursuit of happiness, the limits of freedom, and more. Why does having more options often leave us feeling unsatisfied? Can time travel really destroy the past? And why does seeking pleasure make it harder to find? These are just some of the questions that lie at the heart of our journey through the paradoxes of life. Each story will challenge your assumptions and shed light on the strange, often contradictory nature of existence. Prepare to see the world through a new lens as we explore these 10 paradoxes, each offering a unique glimpse into the unexpected ways our minds and lives are shaped by contradiction. The paradox of choice. Imagine standing in the middle of a dazzlingly colorful marketplace, overwhelmed by the abundance of stalls stretching in every direction. Each vendor offers something different: exotic fruits, fragrant spices, intricate textiles, and sparkling trinkets. Every choice seems to promise satisfaction, but as you wander from one vendor to the next, your excitement fades. You hesitate at each stall, unsure which one to commit to. At the end of the day, you leave empty-handed, burdened not by a lack of options, but by their overwhelming abundance. This is the essence of the paradox of choice. The modern world, especially with its online stores and endless streaming services, offers us more choices than ever before. But counterintuitively, research shows that too many options can lead to decision fatigue, anxiety, and even paralysis. In one famous study, psychologists set up a jam tasting booth in a supermarket. On some days, they offered 24 varieties of jam. On others, they only offered 6. Shoppers were more likely to stop at the booth with 24 choices, but they were 10 times more likely to actually make a purchase from the smaller selection. The researchers concluded that when faced with too many options, people struggle to decide and often end up not deciding at all. More choices also create higher expectations. When you finally make a decision, the lingering thought of what if haunts you. Could the other option have been better? This feeling, called post-decision regret, becomes more pronounced when options multiply. For example, imagine selecting a new phone from dozens of brands and models. Even after your purchase, you might wonder if another model could have been faster, had a better camera, or been more affordable. The abundance of options, instead of enhancing satisfaction, leaves you second-guessing and ultimately less content with your choice. Psychologist Barry Schwartz, who popularized the term paradox of choice, argues that while some degree of choice is necessary for autonomy and well-being, too much choice can create a burden. A few generations ago, decision-making was simpler. Limited options for careers, marriage, and purchases meant that decisions, though constrained, were final. Today, every decision feels weightier because the potential for regret looms larger. Interestingly, this paradox doesn't just affect mundane choices like buying jam or phones. It also extends to significant life decisions such as career paths or romantic partners. The fear of missing out, FOMO, has become a defining feature of modern life. The more we know about the possibilities out there, the harder it becomes to commit to any one of them. We're trapped between the desire for freedom and the fear of regret, paralyzed by our options. In the end, the paradox of choice teaches us that more isn't always better. Simplifying decisions, narrowing our focus, and embracing limitations can lead to greater satisfaction and peace of mind. The grandfather paradox. Time travel stories have always fascinated humanity, but they come with one glaring puzzle that defies logic: the grandfather paradox. Picture this: a scientist driven by an obsession with unraveling the mysteries of time invents a time machine. His mind floods with possibilities. He could witness history or even prevent tragedies. But a chilling thought creeps in. What would happen if he traveled back in time and killed his own grandfather before his father was born? In this scenario, if the scientist succeeded, he would have erased his very existence. Without his grandfather, his father wouldn't exist, and without his father, he wouldn't either. But if he never existed, how could he have traveled back in time to kill his grandfather in the first place? This logical loop creates an insurmountable paradox. It's not just a question of whether time travel is possible, but whether reality itself could survive such a contradiction. The grandfather paradox reveals a fundamental tension between our ideas of cause and effect. In our everyday world, cause leads to effect. Events unfold in a linear sequence. You exist because your parents met, and they existed because their parents met. Time travel, however, scrambles that sequence, potentially breaking the chain of causality. Philosophers and physicists have grappled with the grandfather paradox for decades. Some suggest that time travel would create an alternate timeline. In this alternate reality, the scientist kills his grandfather, but this action spins off a parallel universe in which the scientist never exists. His original timeline, where he was born and built the time machine, remains untouched. This many worlds interpretation is intriguing, but still speculative. Another possibility is what physicists call self-consistency. In this view, time travel is allowed, but paradoxical actions are not. Somehow, the universe would conspire to prevent the scientist from killing his grandfather. Maybe the gun jams, or the scientist changes his mind at the last moment. In this version of reality, free will may be constrained by the laws of physics in ways we can barely understand. The grandfather paradox isn't just an intellectual exercise. It challenges our deepest assumptions about time, reality, and our place in the universe. If cause doesn't lead to effect in a predictable way, then what does that say about our ability to shape the future or learn from the past? Time, which seems so straightforward, suddenly becomes a labyrinth where logic itself can break down. For now, the grandfather paradox remains a tantalizing mystery. It pushes the limits of our understanding and forces us to confront the strange possibility that time, as we know it, may not be as rigid or linear as we think. The paradox of hedonism. In the pursuit of happiness, one might imagine that chasing pleasure would naturally lead to fulfillment. After all, pleasure feels good, so more pleasure should mean more happiness, right? This seemingly straightforward idea collapses under the weight of the paradox of hedonism. The harder you pursue pleasure for its own sake, the more elusive it becomes. Consider the life of a man named David. In his younger years, David worked tirelessly to secure financial success, driven by the belief that once he had enough money, he could finally enjoy life. Vacations, fine dining, luxurious experiences, these would be the rewards of his hard work. But as he accumulated wealth, something strange happened. He began chasing pleasure at every opportunity, yet the joy he anticipated never quite matched the reality. Each indulgence felt hollow, each moment of happiness fleeting. Psychologists refer to this phenomenon as the hedonic treadmill. No matter how pleasurable an experience is, humans quickly adapt to it, and soon that experience becomes the new normal. The next time around, you need more stimulation, more excitement, to feel the same level of happiness. David's vacations became grander, his purchases more extravagant, but the joy they brought him faded faster and faster. The problem, as the paradox of hedonism reveals, is that pleasure is often a byproduct of meaningful activity rather than a goal in itself. If David had found joy in the work itself, in the process of creating or helping others, his happiness might have been more enduring. But by focusing exclusively on the end, the pleasure he anticipated, he undermined his ability to enjoy it when it arrived. The ancient Greek philosopher Epicurus understood this paradox well. Contrary to popular belief, Epicurus didn't advocate for a life of unrestrained indulgence. Instead, he taught that the key to happiness lay in simplicity and moderation. By focusing on friendships, meaningful work, and simple pleasures, people could experience a deeper, more lasting contentment. Epicurus realized that the pursuit of pleasure for its own sake often leads to dissatisfaction because it ignores the complex psychological mechanisms that govern happiness. Modern psychology backs this up. Studies show that people who focus on meaningful activities, whether it's helping others, learning new skills, or building relationships, tend to report higher levels of happiness than those who simply chase pleasure. The joy they experience is more sustainable because it's grounded in a sense of purpose. David eventually learned this lesson the hard way. After years of chasing pleasure, he found himself burnt out and unfulfilled. It wasn't until he shifted his focus, volunteering in his community, reconnecting with friends, finding joy in the process of life rather than the end result, that he began to feel the happiness he had been searching for all along. The paradox of hedonism teaches us that pleasure, when pursued directly, is often fleeting and unsatisfying. True contentment arises from engaging in activities that have meaning beyond the pleasure they provide. The paradox of tolerance. In a thriving society, tolerance is often regarded as a cornerstone value. It allows diverse people with differing views, beliefs, and lifestyles to coexist peacefully. But what happens when tolerance is extended to those who are intolerant? The paradox of tolerance suggests that a society which tolerates intolerance risks being destroyed by it. Picture a bustling city where people from all walks of life come together. There's a palpable sense of harmony. Debates are respectful and disagreements are tolerated. However, one day, a small but vocal group begins advocating for extreme views that seek to undermine the rights of others. They demand the silencing of those who disagree with them and even incite violence against minority groups. At first, the tolerant majority believes that they should allow this group to express their views, no matter how distasteful. After all, isn't tolerance about accepting all perspectives? But soon, the intolerant group grows bolder. They begin rallying in the streets, harassing their opponents, and pushing for laws that would strip away the very freedoms the tolerant society values. The paradox becomes clear: if tolerance is extended to those who refuse to reciprocate it, the foundations of tolerance itself begin to erode. By tolerating intolerance, the society paves the way for its own destruction. This paradox was famously articulated by the philosopher Karl Popper in his work, The Open Society and Its Enemies. Popper argued that unlimited tolerance must lead to the disappearance of tolerance. If a tolerant society does not defend itself against the onslaught of the intolerant, the latter will eventually dominate, and tolerance will be extinguished. The paradox of tolerance is not just theoretical. History is littered with examples of tolerant societies that fell prey to intolerance. Consider the rise of totalitarian regimes in the 20th century. In the early stages, many of these movements were tolerated as legitimate political expressions, but once they gained power, they quickly dismantled the very freedoms that had allowed them to rise. This paradox raises uncomfortable questions about the limits of free speech and expression. Should a tolerant society limit the rights of those who advocate for hatred or violence? Can a balance be struck between preserving freedom and protecting the very foundation of tolerance? These are questions without easy answers, but they are vital for any society that wishes to remain free and open. Ultimately, the paradox of tolerance serves as a warning. Tolerance is not an absolute good, it has its limits. A society that wishes to preserve its values must be willing to defend them, even if that means drawing a line against those who seek to undermine them. The paradox of self-improvement. In an era that celebrates personal growth and self-optimization, the drive for self-improvement has become a dominant theme in many people's lives. From morning routines designed to maximize productivity, to diets and exercise regimens that promise better health, the quest for self-perfection is ubiquitous. Yet, beneath this relentless pursuit lies a troubling question. When will you ever be satisfied? This is the paradox of self-improvement. The more you strive to be better, the harder it becomes to accept yourself as enough. Consider Emma, a young professional who is always looking for ways to enhance her skills, improve her fitness, and perfect her daily routine. She reads every self-help book, follows every new trend in personal development, and pushes herself to new heights at work. On the surface, it seems like Emma has her life together, but in quiet moments, she feels a growing sense of dissatisfaction. No matter how much she improves, there's always something more she could be doing. If she gets promoted at work, she wonders why she isn't earning more. If she loses weight, she obsesses over the next pound to shed. Her pursuit of self-improvement becomes a never-ending cycle of feeling inadequate. The paradox of self-improvement suggests that in the relentless quest to become better, we may lose sight of self-acceptance. When improvement becomes the primary focus, we start seeing ourselves as perpetually unfinished, always in need of fixing. This mentality can lead to chronic dissatisfaction, where nothing we do ever feels like enough. Psychologically, this paradox ties into what's known as the hedonic treadmill, the idea that as we achieve more or improve ourselves, our expectations and standards rise, leaving us no closer to lasting contentment. Emma's experience reflects this treadmill perfectly. Each new achievement sets the bar higher, making it harder to enjoy the fruits of her labor. Furthermore, the cultural narrative around self-improvement often reinforces this paradox. Social media, with its curated images of perfect lives, amplifies the feeling that we are always falling short. The self-help industry, while offering tools for growth, also profits from keeping people in a state of perpetual dissatisfaction, always searching for the next book, the next course, the next hack to become better. To break free from this paradox, some philosophers and psychologists suggest shifting the focus from perfection to self-compassion. Instead of constantly striving to improve, we might learn to accept ourselves as we are, with all our imperfections. This doesn't mean abandoning growth, but rather recognizing that we're already enough, even as we work toward our goals. Emma's journey eventually led her to this realization. After years of chasing improvement, she found that true satisfaction came not from achieving more, but from embracing her flaws and understanding that she didn't need to be perfect to be happy. The paradox of self-improvement reminds us that the quest to be better is not inherently bad, but it must be balanced with self-acceptance. Otherwise, we risk losing ourselves in a never-ending cycle of striving for an unattainable ideal. The paradox of freedom. At first glance, freedom seems like an unquestionable good, something every human being aspires to have in abundance. The ability to do what you want, when you want, without interference from others, is the very definition of liberty. But the paradox of freedom reveals a deeper complexity. Total freedom can lead to chaos and oppression, requiring rules and restrictions to preserve meaningful liberty. Picture a small, close-knit community where the residents decide to abolish all laws. They believe that true freedom means living without constraints, where everyone can act as they please. At first, this newfound liberty feels exhilarating. People enjoy doing whatever they want, whenever they want, with no one to tell them otherwise. But soon, problems arise. Without traffic rules, the streets become dangerous. Without laws to protect property, theft becomes rampant. Eventually, the strong begin to dominate the weak, and those with fewer resources or physical power find themselves oppressed by those who take advantage of the lawlessness. The very freedom they sought leads to a breakdown of order, which in turn results in the loss of freedom for many. This paradox demonstrates that unrestricted freedom often backfires, creating conditions where the freedom of some impinges on the freedom of others. Philosophers have long debated this tension. John Stuart Mill, one of the great thinkers of liberalism, argued that freedom must be constrained by the harm principle, the idea that individuals should be free to do as they please, as long as their actions don't harm others. Without this balance, freedom becomes destructive. The paradox of freedom plays out on a larger scale in societies across the world. Democracies, which are built on the principles of liberty and individual rights, often find themselves grappling with the need to limit certain freedoms to protect the greater good. Free speech, for example, is a cornerstone of democratic society. Yet, even in the most liberal nations, there are limits to speech, such as laws against incitement to violence or hate speech. These restrictions are designed to protect the very freedom of speech they limit, ensuring that one person's freedom doesn't lead to harm for others. In this way, freedom is not an absolute state, but a balance between individual autonomy and collective well-being. Too much freedom, without boundaries, leads to chaos and the erosion of the very liberty it seeks to protect. The paradox of freedom forces us to confront the uncomfortable truth that liberty requires limits. To ensure that everyone in a society can enjoy meaningful freedom, some rules and restrictions must exist. Without them, freedom devolves into tyranny, where the strongest or most unscrupulous individuals take advantage of the lack of structure to dominate others. Ultimately, the paradox of freedom teaches us that true liberty is not the absence of all rules, but the creation of a system where everyone's rights and freedoms are safeguarded through reasonable constraints. Buridan's ass. Imagine a donkey, weary from a long journey, standing equidistant between two identical piles of hay. Both piles are equally lush, equally fragrant, and equally nourishing. The donkey is hungry and has every reason to eat, but as it stands there, it can't decide which pile to approach. One pile is just as good as the other, so no matter how much the donkey considers the options, it remains frozen in place. Time passes, and despite being surrounded by abundance, the donkey eventually starves, paralyzed by its inability to choose. This tale, often referred to as Buridan's ass, illustrates the danger of indecision in the face of equally appealing choices. Named after the 14th century philosopher Jean Buridan, who used this example to explore free will and rationality, the paradox highlights a profound problem: the paralysis of indecision when all options seem equally good. In real life, humans often face similar dilemmas, though not as extreme as the donkey situation. Consider a young graduate deciding between two equally attractive job offers. Both offer competitive salaries, interesting work, and good benefits. Weeks pass, and the graduate grows more anxious, paralyzed by the fear of making the wrong choice. Every moment spent deliberating makes the decision feel weightier, until eventually opportunities may be lost. This paradox points to the limits of pure rationality. Logically, the donkey should be able to choose either pile of hay, since both are equally beneficial. Similarly, the young graduate should pick a job and move forward, trusting that no option is perfect, but that either would provide growth and opportunity. But human decision-making is rarely this simple. We often fear the consequences of choosing incorrectly, even when the options are indistinguishable. The more we weigh our options, the harder it becomes to act. Modern behavioral psychology has shown that too many choices can lead to what's known as decision fatigue. When faced with an overwhelming array of equally good options, we may avoid choosing altogether or feel dissatisfied with whatever we do choose. In an age where choices are abundant, from streaming services to career paths, Buridan's ass is more relevant than ever. In some ways, Buridan's ass also questions the nature of free will. If all factors are equal, is choice even possible, or are we destined to remain frozen, waiting for some external force to break the tie? The donkey situation may seem absurd, but it reflects a deeper truth about human nature. The more we try to rationalize every decision, the harder it becomes to act. The lesson of Buridan's ass is clear. At times, it is better to make a decision, any decision, than to remain stuck in endless deliberation. Life doesn't wait, and failing to act can have consequences just as severe as choosing poorly. The paradox of value. In the early morning hours of a blistering desert, a traveler stumbles across a hidden spring. Parched and near collapse, he cups his hands to drink deeply from the water, feeling life flow back into his veins. After quenching his thirst, the traveler continues on his journey. But in his pocket he carries a diamond, a rare and valuable gem. He knows that this single stone could buy him unimaginable wealth. And yet in that moment by the spring, the water, essential for survival, held more value than the diamond. How can something so plentiful and necessary be so cheap, while a non-essential luxury commands such a high price? This dilemma is the paradox of value, also known as the diamond water paradox, first identified by the philosopher Adam Smith. It asks a simple yet perplexing question: why do non-essential items like diamonds have a higher monetary value than life-sustaining resources like water? This paradox illustrates the complex relationship between utility, scarcity, and value. Water is essential for all living beings. Without it, life would quickly cease to exist. And yet, in many parts of the world, water is inexpensive, abundant, and often taken for granted. Diamonds, on the other hand, have no life-sustaining function. They are decorative, symbols of status and wealth, yet they are worth exponentially more in the marketplace. Economists explain this paradox by distinguishing between total utility and marginal utility. Total utility refers to the overall benefit we get from something, like water, which provides immense utility by sustaining life. Marginal utility, however, refers to the additional benefit gained from consuming one more unit of that good. In a world where water is abundant, the value of an additional glass of water is low, because our need for it has already been satisfied. However, because diamonds are scarce and seen as luxury items, each additional diamond is perceived as highly valuable. This is why in the marketplace, scarcity often determines price rather than necessity. Diamonds are rare, difficult to mine, and associated with cultural significance, all of which drive up their value. Water, on the other hand, while essential, is more readily available in most places, leading to its lower cost. But the paradox of value forces us to reflect on deeper issues beyond economics. It raises questions about human priorities and the irrational nature of value. Why do we place such a high value on objects that bring no practical benefit to our lives, while undervaluing the things that sustain us? As environmental concerns grow and water scarcity becomes a more pressing global issue, the paradox takes on even greater significance. The diamond water paradox reminds us that value is often a reflection of human perception, not inherent worth. The true value of something cannot always be measured by its price tag, but by its essential role in sustaining life. The paradox of selflessness. Picture a moment when you've helped someone in need. Maybe you donated money to a charity, helped a friend move, or offered a listening ear during a difficult time. You did it out of kindness, expecting nothing in return, but afterward you felt good, maybe even a little proud of your actions. If the act of helping others brings you joy, was it truly selfless? This is the heart of the paradox of selflessness. Can any act truly be selfless if it makes the giver feel good? On the surface, selflessness seems to mean putting others' needs before your own. Altruism, after all, is about acting in the interest of others without regard for personal gain. But the paradox reveals a contradiction. If selfless acts bring the giver joy, satisfaction, or a sense of purpose, then some level of personal benefit exists. This raises a challenging question. Can any act ever be entirely selfless? Consider the case of a philanthropist who donates millions to build schools in impoverished areas. The schools will help countless children receive an education and break the cycle of poverty. But the philanthropist gains public recognition, admiration, and perhaps a sense of fulfillment. Does the personal benefit undermine the altruism of the act? Philosophers and psychologists have long debated whether true selflessness exists. The 18th century philosopher Immanuel Kant believed that for an action to be moral, it must be done purely out of a sense of duty, without regard for personal gain or emotional satisfaction. However, this view overlooks the complex motivations behind human behavior. Evolutionary biology suggests that altruism has roots in survival. Helping others, especially within a group or community, increases the chances of reciprocal help in the future, ultimately benefiting the individual. Modern psychology also supports the idea that altruism is linked to personal well-being. Studies show that people who regularly engage in acts of kindness tend to experience greater happiness, lower stress, and even improved physical health. The helper's high is a well-documented phenomenon where the act of giving triggers the release of endorphins, leading to a sense of joy and satisfaction. The paradox of selflessness challenges our understanding of human motivation. If helping others makes us feel good, does that diminish the moral value of the act? Or does it reveal something deeper about the interconnectedness of human beings, that in helping others, we are in fact helping ourselves as well? Perhaps the paradox isn't a flaw, but a reflection of the dual nature of altruism. Helping others and receiving joy in return are not mutually exclusive. True altruism might lie not in denying ourselves any benefit, but in acting out of a genuine desire to improve the lives of others, even if it happens to make us feel good in the process. The paradox of vulnerability. In a society that prizes strength, independence, and resilience, vulnerability is often viewed as a weakness. We are taught to hide our flaws, suppress our emotions, and maintain a facade of control. Yet, as counterintuitive as it seems, opening ourselves up to vulnerability can lead to deeper connections, stronger relationships, and even personal growth. This is the paradox of vulnerability. Revealing our weaknesses can, paradoxically, make us stronger. Consider a scenario where a leader admits to their team that they made a mistake. Rather than hiding behind excuses or projecting false confidence, they own their error and express their willingness to learn from it. At first, this admission might seem risky. Leaders are supposed to be decisive and infallible, right? But in reality, this display of vulnerability often leads to increased trust and respect from the team. By admitting their mistake, the leader demonstrates humility, openness, and a willingness to grow, all of which strengthen their leadership in the eyes of others. The same is true in personal relationships. Take the case of a couple going through a rough patch, one partner feeling overwhelmed breaks down and admits their fears, anxieties, and insecurities. Rather than pushing the other away, this act of vulnerability creates a space for empathy and understanding. It allows both partners to connect on a deeper level, fostering intimacy that wasn't there before. The paradox lies in the fact that vulnerability, which feels like exposing a weakness, actually leads to strength. The act of being vulnerable is inherently courageous. It requires facing the fear of rejection or judgment and choosing to reveal your true self anyway. This openness builds resilience, not only in relationships but within ourselves. Brené Brown, a researcher known for her work on vulnerability and shame, has famously said, "Vulnerability is the birthplace of innovation, creativity, and change." By allowing ourselves to be vulnerable, we tap into a well of authenticity that fuels personal and professional growth. Yet the instinct to protect ourselves often prevents us from embracing this truth. The paradox of vulnerability challenges the belief that strength comes from hiding weakness. In reality, those who are willing to be vulnerable are often the most resilient. They are not afraid to admit their flaws, learn from their mistakes, or ask for help when they need it. This kind of openness fosters deeper connections with others and leads to more fulfilling, meaningful relationships. In a world that encourages us to be strong by masking our vulnerabilities, the paradox reminds us that real strength comes from embracing our humanity, our imperfections, our fears, and our emotional complexity. By accepting vulnerability, we allow ourselves to grow and build stronger, more authentic connections with those around us. Conclusion. Paradoxes aren't just abstract puzzles for philosophers, they mirror the complex realities of human life. Each of the 10 paradoxes we've explored here, whether it's the overwhelming burden of choice, the strange logic of time travel, or the paradoxical nature of freedom, offers profound lessons about the ways we navigate our world. What we've seen is that contradictions often exist, not because the world is broken or chaotic, but because our understanding of it is limited. Paradoxes push us to think deeper, to question our assumptions, and to embrace the complexity of life rather than shy away from it. In confronting these paradoxes, we learn more about ourselves and the delicate balance between desire and fulfillment, control and freedom, connection and isolation. Ultimately, these paradoxes remind us that life is full of nuance. The search for simplicity often leads to more questions, but in embracing these contradictions, we come closer to understanding the richness and complexity of the human experience. While we may not resolve these paradoxes entirely, learning to live with them might just be the key to navigating a world that's far from black and white. Thank you for spending time with us through Spookscope today. Feel free to share your knowledge and wisdom in the comment section below. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share it with your friends and family. Until next time, my dear spooker, stay curious.